What man is he that liveth, and shall not see death? Shall he deliver his soul from the hand of the grave? Selah. It is very hard to determine where all that are here shall be within 30 years. For even before that time come, many, if not all of us who are here, shall have taken up our everlasting lodging. And whether we shall take it up in the eternity of joy or in the eternity of pain is also hard to determine. Only this one thing I am sure of, that all of us shall shortly be gone, and before long the shadows of death shall be sitting upon our eyelids, and our eye strings shall begin to break. Therefore, I would the more seriously ask you, what would you think if death were approaching this night unto you? Do you think that Jesus Christ has gone up to prepare a place for you, even for you? Surely I think we are all near to eternity. And there are some hearing me today whom I defy the world to assure that ever they shall hear another sermon. And therefore I exhort you all to hear this preaching, as if it were the last preaching that you should ever hear. And oh, that we would speak it, as if it were the last sermon that ever we would preach unto you. Believe me, death is a different thing than we take it to be. Oh, what will many of us do in the day of our visitation, when desolation shall come from afar? Where will we flee for rest, and where will we leave our glory? Old rich men, where will you flee when death assaults you? And old poor men, where will you flee when death assaults you? And old women, where will you flee when death assaults you? And young women, where will you flee when death assaults you? It was an ancient observation of David from Psalm 39, verse 5, that God had made his days as a handbreadth. This either may relate to the fourfold state of man, namely his infancy, his childhood, his manhood, and his old age, or it may relate to the fourfold time of his life, namely his morning, his forenoon, his afternoon, and his evening. Yet all our lifetime is but a day. And do you not think that our day is near to an end? Now, before that I begin to speak anything from the words read in the beginning, I shall speak a few things to these two questions, which I conceive may not altogether be unprofitable. Question 1. Whether it is lawful for any to desire to die, and to return unto their long and endless home. Whether it be lawful for one to cry out, "O time, time, flee away. In all my shadows let them be gone, that so long an eternity may come." And here's the answer. I say, it is lawful in some cases for one to desire to die. For it was Paul's desire in Philippians 1:23, where he says, "I am in a strait betwixt two, having a desire to depart and to be with Christ, which is far better." And also in 2 Corinthians 5:2, where it says, "We groan earnestly, desiring to be clothed upon with our house, which is from heaven. Now I long greatly till the 21st year of my age come, when my minority shall be overpast, that I may be entered heir to that matchless inheritance." But to clear in what cases it is lawful to desire to die, first I say, it is lawful to desire to die when it flows from a desire of uninterrupted fellowship and communion with Christ in conjunction with him. This is clear from 2 Corinthians 5:6, knowing that whilst we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. Therefore, verse 8, we are willing rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. Also, it is clear from Philippians 1:23, I am in a strait betwixt two, having a desire to depart and to be with Christ, which is far better. It was his great end to have a near and unmixed communion with Christ. Now, what ails you, Paul might one have said? Are you not content to stay here a while? No, says Paul. I desire to be gone and to be with Christ. Were you never with him here, Paul? I have been with him, he says, but what is all my being with him here in comparison of my being with him above? Whilst I am present in the body, I am absent from the Lord. Therefore, I will never be at rest, he says, get what I will, until I get Christ, until I get those naked and immediate embracings of that noble plant of renown, the flower of the stock of Jesse, who is the light of the higher house and the eternal admiration of angels. Secondly, it is lawful to desire to die when it flows from the excellencies of heaven, from a desire to partake of those excellent things that are there. This is clear from 2 Corinthians 5:4. We groan, being burdened, or as the word is, we groan as they who are pressed under a heavy burden, that we may be clothed upon, that mortality might be swallowed up with life. What ails you to groan in this way, Paul? Oh, he says, I groan that mortality may be swallowed up of life. Number 3, it is lawful to desire to die when it flows from a desire to be saved from the body of death, and from those temptations that assault us, and from those oppressions whereunto we are subject by it. Doubtless, Paul desired to die on this account when he cried out in Romans 7:24, O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? He longed greatly for that day, wherein he shall be made white like the wings of a dove, covered with silver, whose feathers are of yellow gold. Oh, says Paul, I am as one impatient, till I be above, where I shall be clothed with those excellent and clean robes, the righteousness of Christ. And oh, says Paul, I think every day to be as a year, till I be possessed of that kingdom where Satan cannot tempt, and the creature cannot yield, and where I shall be free from all my fears of sinning. Now, in all these respects, who would not desire to die? But to guard all these, I would give you these 4 cautions. The first caution. Your desire to die should not be self-willed, but you should desire to die with a submission to the will of God, so that although he would fill up 15 more years to your life, you should be content to live it out. And the second caution. When your desires are hasty and offhand, suspect them. For some, when they meet up with an outward cross, without any deliberation, will cry out, Oh, to be gone! Oh, that I were dead! But your desire to die should be deliberate, not hasty or rash. The third caution. It is not lawful to desire to die because of personal afflictions. Many, when they meet with bitter afflictions, will cry out, Oh, to be gone! And they long for death even upon that account. Such was Job's desire in chapter 6, verses 8 and 9, where he said, Oh, that I might have my request, even that it would please God to destroy me. This desire was very unlawful. And the fourth and final caution. It is not lawful to desire to die when your predominant idol is taken away from you. Yet such was Jonah's desire in chapter 4:3. Jonah thought his credit and his reputation, which was his idol, was gone and could never be regained. Therefore, he wished to die. But I would say this to you, that some will have 10 desires for death when they have not one desire for heaven. And what moves Christians to be so desirous to die? It is not so much because of their hope as because of their anxiety. It is not so much because of their confidence as because of their impatience. But I say unto you, when your desires of death are not accompanied with the desires of heaven, suspect them. Secondly, I would say this, that there are some who will have 10 desires for death, when they will not have one for the death of the body of death. But it were good for you who are such, to be desiring the death of the body of death. Then you would be in a more suitable frame to desire to die. And third, some will have hearty desires to die, and yet when death comes, they will be as unwilling to die as any. It has been observed that some who have much desire to die, when death came, have cried out, "Oh, spare a little, that I may recover strength." There is a great difference between a desire to die and death itself. It is a very easy thing to desire to die, but it is a very great business to meet with death and to look it in the face when it comes. We think death, before it comes near us, to be but child's play. But when we meet with it, it makes us change our thoughts, for it is a great business to die. Now our second question is this: is it lawful for a Christian to desire to live when he is summoned to die? Here's the answer. In some cases, it is lawful for a Christian to desire to live even when he is summoned to die, which is clear from the practice of David in Psalm 39:13, where he prays that the Lord would spare him a little. It is also clear from the practice of good Hezekiah in Isaiah 38:3, when he was commanded to set his house in order, for he should die and not live. And he cried out, "Remember now, O Lord, how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight." And Hezekiah wept sore. Or as the words are in the original, he wept with a great weeping. But to guard this, take these two cautions. Here's the first caution. Your desire to live when you are summoned to die should not be self-willed, but instead should be with submission to the will of God, that if it is his pleasure to remove you presently out of time, that you should be content to die. And the second caution is this: your desire to live should have gracious principles, and also a very gracious end, as is most clear from David in Psalm 39:13, where he said, "Oh, spare me a little, that I may recover strength, before I go hence and be no more." His desire to live was that he might have victory over his idols, as if he had said, "My desire to live is that I may have strength to wrestle with and to overcome my idols." And without all controversy, Hezekiah's desire was a most precious and well-grounded desire. However, I would say this unto you, that you should examine your desires to live as much, if not more, as your desires to die. For we are ready to shun death if we could. But he is that universal king unto whom all of us must be subject before long. Now in the words which were read unto you, there are 6 things which might be clearly observed from them. First, that it is a most clear and infallible truth that all persons shall once see death, as is clear in these words, "Who is he that liveth and shall not see death?" Secondly, that this truth, that we shall once see death, is not much believed or thought upon by many. Therefore it is that the psalmist doubles the assertion. "What man is he that liveth and shall not see death? Shall he deliver his soul," that is his life, "from the hand," that is, from the power of the grave? Thirdly, that sometimes a Christian may win to a solid faith of this truth, that once he must die. This the psalmist got unto, as is also clear in that word, "Who is he that liveth and shall not see death?" And fourthly, that the certainty of this, that once we shall die, should be kept in our mind. Therefore, that note of attention, Selah, is put to it, as if he had said, "Take heed, that there is none living that shall not die. And fifthly, that howbeit some persons put the evil day far away, as if they were not to see death. Yet is the day coming when they shall see death, and death shall take them by the hand. And sixthly, we shall take notice of this from the context that the Christian, who is much in minding the brevity of his life, will believe the certainty of his death. The psalmist was speaking of the shortness of his life in the preceding verse, and in this verse he speaks of the certainty of death. Now, as for the first of these things, observe, namely, that it is certain and sure that we shall all once die, I hope there are none of you here who will deny it. Although I confess some of you believe what was said by the woman of Tekoa in 2 Samuel 14:14, we must all die and be like water spilt upon the ground that cannot be gathered up again. God does not accept the person of any. Or as in Job 30, verse 23, I know that thou wilt bring me to death, and to the house appointed for all living. And it is very clear in Ecclesiastes 8, verse 8. There is no man that hath power over the Spirit to retain the Spirit, neither hath he power in the day of death. And there is no discharge in that war, neither shall wickedness deliver those that are given to it. And it is also clear in Hebrews 9:27, it is appointed unto men once to die. So that it is most clear that we must die. I remember of one Philip, king of Macedonia, who had a substitute for this very end, to cry at his chamber door every morning, Memento mori, memento mori, memento mori, remember, thou art to die. And it is reported to have been the practice of the nobles of Greece, in the day whereon their emperor was crowned, that they presented a marble stone unto him, and he was asked after what fashion he would have his tombstone made. Which practice speaks forth this unto us, that although these were most destitute of the light of the Scripture, they were very mindful of death. Believe me, death may surprise us before we be aware. For it is most certain that we must die. But there is nothing more uncertain than the way how, and the time when we shall die. Death will surprise some, as it did Abel in the open field in Genesis 4:8. Death will surprise some, as it did Eglon in his parlor in Judges 3:21. And death will surprise some, as it did Saul and Jonathan in the fight in 1 Samuel 31. Now, in speaking to this point, I shall first speak a little to those advantages which attend those that live within the continual sight of death. Secondly, I shall give you some considerations to press you to prepare for death. And thirdly, I shall give you some direction to help you to prepare for death. And then we shall proceed to the second point of doctrine, which we observe from the text. And I shall speak a few things from it unto you, and so come to a close for this time. First, then, we conceive that there are these 7 advantages which attend those who live within the continual sight of this truth, that they must die. First, the faith of an approaching death will make a soul exceedingly diligent in duty. And this was our blessed Lord's divinity. In John 9:4, he said, I must work the work of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. That is, death is approaching. Therefore I must work. It is clear also in 2 Peter 1:12, compared with verse 14, which says, Wherefore I will not be negligent to put you always in remembrance of these things, though you know them, and be established in the present truth. Yea, I think it meet, as long as I am in this tabernacle, to stir you up by putting you in remembrance, knowing that shortly I must put off this my tabernacle, even as our Lord Jesus Christ has showed me. In the 12th verse, Peter is exceedingly diligent in his duty. And the ground of his diligence is in the 14th verse, knowing that shortly I must put off my tabernacle. Yea, it is even the Epicure's argument when he says, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we shall die. And should not the Christian much more cry out, let me watch and pray, for tomorrow I may die? I say, if the Epicures did make use of this notion to make them vigorous in the pursuit of the pleasures, how much more should a Christian improve it for making him vigorous in the pursuit of his duty? And therefore I say unto you all, O be diligent, for your night is drawing near. O Christians and expectants of heaven, are you not afraid lest you be overtaken before you have walked the half of your journey? For if you be overtaken on your journey to heaven before you come to the end of your race, there is no retiring place whereunto you may turn aside to lodge. And therefore work, and work while it is day. For behold, death is approaching, and then we shall all be called to an account. Number 2, the faith of approaching death will make a Christian exceedingly active in duty. He will not only be diligent, but also exceedingly serious and zealous in the exercise of his duty. And this is clear from that notable exhortation of Ecclesiastes 9:10. Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with all thy might. And the reason is, for there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave whither thou goest. Wherefore, be active while you are alive, for you shall never work any more after you are dead. And if you leave but one work undone, there is no doing of it after death. There is no work, says Solomon, in the grave. Therefore, be active. Number 3, the faith of this truth, that we all must die, will help a Christian to be exceedingly mortified to the things of this present world. O covetous men and women, if you would shake hands with cold death but once every morning, I would defy you to pursue the world so much as you do. Paul was much in the meditation of his change, which made him in 2 Corinthians 4:18 to overlook those things that are temporary. For we look not, says he, at the things which are seen, which are temporal, but at the things which are not seen, which are eternal. And therefore, in chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, knowing that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, we have a building of God, an house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Therefore, in this we groan earnestly, desiring to be clothed upon with our house which is from heaven. What ails you, Paul, might one have said. May you not take a look at the world? No, he says, for I know that if the earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, I have a house with God, not made with hands, but eternal in the heavens. That is, I know that before long the pins of my tabernacle will be loosed, and it will fall down around my ears, and therefore I must look for another dwelling place. And 1 Corinthians 7:31 says, the fashion of this world passes away. Therefore, he says in verse 32, I would have you without carefulness, caring how to please the Lord. And Philippians 4:5, let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. As if he had said, death is approaching and at hand. Therefore, I entreat you, be sober. But I think many of us will be found like Saul, hid among the stuff. That is, we will be lying among the midst of the pleasures of this passing world. But I say unto you, who are such a one, that death will break the strings of your harp. Your music will quickly cease. Oh, and death will make you have a low esteem of the world. Oh, blessed is the person who has these thoughts of the world all along his way, which he shall have of it at death. Have not the most cursed wretches been forced to cry out, "Oh, I would give 10,000 worlds for Christ"? And have not some persons who have had the moon upon their head and who have made their belly their god been forced to cry out at death, "O cursed person that I am, that ever made the world my God. Alas, that I have contented myself with the world. Therefore I say unto you, who are such a one, O stop your pursuit after the world, for death is approaching, and that will cause all your worldly comforts to vanish." Point number 4. When a Christian believes this truth, that he must die, it will be an exceeding great restraint to keep him from sinning, as is clear from Job 31:13, compared with verse 14, where Job, thinking over many good deeds done by himself, says, "What then shall I do when God arises up? And when he visits, what shall I answer him?" As if he had said, "Sirs, do not mistake what I say. I am not boasting much of myself, for I could have not done otherwise. Else what should I do when God arises up? How could I answer to God if I had done otherwise?" Now I think it would be a notable practice for each of you to say, "O temptation, what will I answer to God when he arises up to reprove me if I should yield to you?" Likewise, Ecclesiastes 11:9, where Solomon, dissuading young men to pursue after their vanity, brings this as a reason. "Know you that for all these things God will bring you into judgment? Therefore I say unto you, who are often tempted to sin, let death and let reckoning with God be still in your sight. And I defy you to embrace half so many temptations as you now do. I entreat you to answer all your temptations with this word: what shall I do when God rises up? And what shall I answer when he visits me?" Number 5. When a Christian lives within the sight of this truth, that he shall once see death, it will make him exceedingly patient under every cross that he meets. Such a Christian will hardly meet with a cross, but he will quiet himself with this: "Death will put me beyond this cross. This is but a cloud that will quickly pass away." And for this cause did David so composedly put up that desire in Psalm 39:4, saying, "Lord, make me to know mine end in the measure of my days." The second thing that I shall speak unto from this first observation is this, namely, this is a most certain and infallible truth, that all persons shall once see death, shall be to give you some considerations for pressing you to prepare for death. The first consideration is this: to die well and in the Lord is a most difficult work. Therefore I call upon you to prepare for death. It is a difficult work to communicate in a right way. It is a difficult work to pray in a right way. It's a difficult work to discuss things in a right way. But I must tell you, it is still more difficult work to die in a right way than any of these. It is true, it is more difficult to communicate well than to pray well. Yet it is much more difficult to die well than to communicate well. For it is a more difficult work to die in the Lord. Death will put the most accurate Christian that is here to a wonderful examination. And therefore, I will tell you of 9 things that death will try in you. Number 1. Death will try both the reality and the strength of your faith. It may be easy for you to keep up faith under many difficulties, but death will put your faith to the greatest test it has ever met with. Yea, know this: the faith of the strongest believer may get, and ordinarily does get, a test of death, the like whereof it never had before. Therefore prepare for death. Number 2, death will try your love to God. Some persons pretend much love to him. But death will propose this question to such a person. Lovest thou him more than these? Lovest thou him more than thy wife, more than thy house, more than thy friends? But your unwillingness to die gives much ground to fear that many have little love to Christ, but much love to the world, and so dare not answer the question saying, Lord, you know that I love you. Number 3, death will try your enjoyments. Some of you may be ready to think that you meet with many enjoyments, so that you may reckon as you think to 40 enjoyments and sweet outlettings. But beware that death bring them not down to 20. I have known some who thought they have met 40 times with God. But when death came, it made them take down the account to the half. Therefore, seeing death will try the reality of your enjoyments, oh, prepare for it. Number 4, death will try your patience. You may seem to have much patience now, but when death comes and you are about to die, it will put your patience to a great trial. Therefore, prepare for it. Number 5, death will try the reality of your duties. Yea, even those duties wherein you had the most satisfaction. As you're communicating aright in such a place, you hope that is sure. You're reading the Scripture at such a time aright. You hope that is sure. You prayed at such a time aright, and you hope that is sure. You did meditate in such a place aright, and you hope that is sure. But believe me, death may make you change your thoughts. For there are some persons who have communicated and prayed, read Scripture, and all the rest as right as any in this generation, who for all that will not find 6 duties wherein they can find satisfaction at death. And therefore our need is great to prepare for it. Number 6, death, when it comes, will exceedingly try your sincerity. An hypocrite may go all along his whole way undiscovered, yet death may bring him to light and make him appear what kind of man he is. Number 7, death will discover unto you many hidden and secret sins which you never had a thought of before. Yet albeit you thought these had been forgotten, death will let you see them standing between you and the light of God's countenance. Number 8, death will accurately test your mortification of sin. Some will think they have come a great length in mortification, but believe me, death will try it and put it to the touchstone. Number 9, death will try your hope, whether it is real or not. I shall say only this, that all the other graces must lower the sail to faith. And so it is that faith must carry us through, being that last triumphing grace, which must fit us for the field when all other graces will faint and lie by. It is faith that must enter us fairly within the borders of eternity. It is faith that must withstand all the temptations of death. Yea, all the other graces must, as it were, stand by and see faith strike the last stroke in the war. The second consideration to press you to mind death is this, that you are to die only once. And doing it in a wrong way can never be helped. If you do not pray aright, you may get that mended. If you do not meditate aright, you may get that mended. If you do not communicate aright, you may get that mended. But alas, if you do not die aright, there is no mending of that. Therefore, oh, prepare for death, that you may die well, seeing you are to die but once. The third consideration to press you to mind death is this, that they are pronounced blessed who die in the Lord. Revelation 14, verse 13 says, blessed are the dead which die in the Lord. Oh, let that provoke you to prepare for death, so that you may die in the Lord. That is the only way to make you eternally happy. I confess it is a question difficult to determine, whether it is more difficult to die well or to live well. I shall not answer it, but rather desire you to study both. The fourth consideration to press you to prepare for death is this, namely, that though you put all your works by your hand, preparing well before death, yet you shall find that death shall have work enough for itself, yea, as much as you shall get done. It will then be much for you to attain to patience. It will be much for you to attain to the sight of your justification, and then it will be much more for you to attain unto assurance. Oh, then, is it not needful for you to put all your work toward preparation before your latter end comes? Wherefore I may say unto you, as Moses said in his song in Deuteronomy 32, verse 29, oh, that they were wise, that they understood this, that they would consider their latter end. Oh, that you had this piece of divine wisdom. I pray you consider that sad word from Lamentations 1:9. She remembereth not her last end. And what of it? Therefore she came down wonderfully. So will the downcoming of many in this generation be wonderful, who consider not their last end. The fifth consideration for pressing you to prepare for death is this, namely, that their labor shall end, but their works shall not be forgotten. As is clear from that foresighted place in Revelation 14:13, they rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. And is not that a glorious advantage? The sixth consideration to press you to prepare for death is this, namely, that death may come upon you before you are aware of it. You know not, but death may surprise you this night before you go home to your houses. And therefore, let that press you to study a constant preparation for death. The seventh consideration to prepare for death is this, namely, that as death leaves you, so will judgment find you. If death shall leave you strangers to Christ, you shall appear before him strangers to him, and therefore I entreat you all to prepare for it. I think that noble practice of Paul exceeding worthy of imitation, for he says in 1 Corinthians 15:31, I die daily, which I think doth comprehend these three things. First, that Paul had death always in his sight. Second, it comprehends this, that he endeavored to keep such a frame of mind so that at every moment he should be ready to die, so that whenever death should put a summons in his hand, he would be content to answer. And third, it also comprehends this, that he labors to lay aside and remove all things out of the way that might detain him from laying down his tabernacle. Oh, saith Paul, I labor to clear myself from all hindrances, as that whenever I shall be summoned to remove out of time, I may willingly lay down my life. Therefore, I would ask you this question. When shall you make your last testament? I think it were suitable for us to be renewing our latter will every day. For in so doing, Paul made an excellent testament, the better of which none that died since have made. For he says in 2 Timothy 4:7 and 8, I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. These are very sweet articles. And then he added, henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day. And do you not think that that is very sweet, that he would leave something unto you in Christ's name? Namely, when he says next, and that not for me only, but for all them that wait for his appearance. Now, I come to the third thing proposed, to give some directions for helping you to prepare for death. Direction number 1. I entreat you to be much in preparation for death every day, for it is even a preparation for heaven. To be taking a sight of your grave and latter end every day. Direction number 2. I entreat you to be much in these following duties. First, in self-examination, that your matters may be clear with God. For many a ragged matter shall we have when death and we shall meet. And secondly, to be much in the exercise of repentance, that so you may have every fault and corruption in you mourned for, before death, and you meet. And third, be much in the exercise of faith, making your calling and election sure. And fourth, be much in the exercise of mortification. And that will help you to keep a loose grip, not only of the world, but also of your idols. If you are diligent in these duties, you shall undoubtedly be prepared for death. Direction number 3. Be much in minding the excellent things of heaven. A Christian that would be prepared for death would have all his thoughts and conversations there. I think it should be an excellent help in preparation for death to take a sight of the crown every day. Direction number 4. Labor always to keep a good conscience, void of offense toward God and man. I say, labor to keep your conscience clear, and that shall be a continual feast unto you. Direction 5. Do not neglect any known duty. Do not crucify any conviction, neither break any resolution. Put these 3 together, and that will exceedingly help you to prepare for death. I say, see that you do not venture to neglect any known duty. See that you do not venture to crucify any conviction, and see that you do not venture to break your resolutions.